Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of KRAD COVID Readings. I'm Keith R.A. DeCandido. This time around, I want to read one of my semi-original works. In 2017, Michael A. Ventrella and Jonathan Maberry put together an anthology called BAKER STREET IRREGULARS, which were alternate takes on Sherlock Holmes. For my part, I did a story called Identity, which took place in modern New York and featured a young woman named Shirley Holmes and her new friend, Jack Watson, a medical student at Columbia University. It came out so well that when Michael and Jonathan did a second volume called BAKER STREET IRREGULARS with the subtitle The Game Is Afoot, I did a second story with Shirley-and-Jack. And it is my intent to hopefully someday do more Shirley-and-Jack stories as well, as I had a lot of fun writing them. The reason I say semi-original, besides the fact, obviously, they're based on Sherlock Holmes and John Watson, is that these stories are all updates of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle stories. So the first story was called Identity, which was a modern take on the story called A Case of Identity. And for The Game Is Afoot, I did the story I'm about to read for you now, which was called Six Red Dragons, which was based on the adventure of the Six Napoleons. And I am going to read it for you now. So here is Six Red Dragons, an adventure of Shirley Holmes and Jack Watson. I'd had a really long day, and I was half asleep, fumbling for my keys at the front door, when someone walked up to me and asked, "Need some help, sir?" I turned to see a man in a denim jacket, button-down shirt, and khakis. His skin was even darker than mine, and he had a short afro and a Haitian accent. He was shorter than me, but I'm 6'3", so that put him in company with a lot of people. "I'm fine, just trying to find my keys." "You live here?" he asked dubiously. I sighed. I got this a lot since I'd moved to this fancy old house on Riverside Drive on 107th Street. "Yes, I live here." Then the man put his hands on his hips, pushing his jacket aside to reveal a gold shield on his belt. Quickly, before he decided to unholster his weapon, I said, "I have the top floor. I moved in back in the new year. My name's Jack Watson. I'm a med student at Columbia." The man broke into a huge smile. "Oh, you're the one they brought in to be Shirley's companion once her aunt got cancer." He put out a hand. "I'm Guillaume Lestrade. I'm a detective at the 24th Precinct." I stared at the hand for a second before returning the shake. Pleased to meet you." "My apologies for the racial profiling." "Yeah, well, I'm used to it by now. What brings you here, detective?" "A tea with Shirley. She assisted me on a case a year ago. She did not take credit, for which I was grateful, as NYPD frowns on unofficial consultants, particularly ones who are only 20 years old." "But you come and have tea with her in return?" "And tell her some of the current cases floating about the precinct. Perhaps you could join us?" I chuckled. I knew that tone of desperation. I'd had it myself a few times. Shirley could be a little intense. I've had one shitty day and was really looking forward to some rack time, so putting up with a conversation with Shirley wasn't really on my to-do list. "If she's all right with it, though, I'll sit in." I pointed out, "But you owe me one." Lestrade's grin widened. "That is eminently fair." I finally found the right set of keys and led Lestrade inside. We entered the fancy foyer, and I took Lestrade's denim jacket and hung it with mine on the wooden coat rack. Shirley Holmes was in the dining room, a full tea set in front of her, with 2 teacups on saucers and a pair of small plates put out at 2 of the big dining room chairs. Shirley was only about 5 feet nothing, and thin. She couldn't have been more than 90 pounds soaking wet, so she looked like a little kid sitting in the big wooden chair with the flared arms. Me, I could barely squeeze into the thing. "Hey, Shirley," I said as I led Lestrade in. "Your cop buddy's here." She was arranging the pastries on the 3-tiered tray and didn't look up at either of us. "Welcome, detective. Hello, Jack. I see you had a difficult shift in the emergency room." Shirley hadn't known that I was doing an ER shift today, mostly because I hadn't known myself until I showed up at work. Like most med students, I went where they told me to go, and because someone called in sick, I got the ER shift instead of the lab shift I was scheduled for. With a sigh, Shirley added, "Before you ask how I knew, you're wearing a different shirt than you were wearing when you left, specifically the one you keep in your locker as a backup. You have the same soap smell you had the last time you had to shower at the hospital after your shift. There are tiny flecks of blood and vomit on parts of your shoes, and a bruise on your left arm, all an indication of the somewhat more chaotic nature of an emergency room shift. Also, you have bags under your eyes, which has only happened when you've worked the emergency room. I wasn't going to ask that, I said with a smile. I'd given up asking how she knew stuff, because it was always just that she noticed every damn thing. And it was Saturday night in the ER, which meant lots of puke, piss, and shit on top of the expected blood. I was just going to ask if I could join you and the detective here for your tea. I did not set a place for you. However, your need for caffeine is obvious, and the traditional tea service is generally more than 2 people can reasonably drink, so you may join us, yes. I had to admit, as soon as I saw the 2 places set out, I figured she was going to kick me upstairs because I wasn't part of the already set service, but she worked her way through to letting me stay. I was kind of hoping she wouldn't. The detective owing me a favor was nice and all, but I was really tired. Still, she was right that the caffeine hit would be good. I offered to get my own place setting, and Shirley said, "That will not be necessary. I am the host, and it is my responsibility to adjust the place settings accordingly." "Maybe, but I know where everything is, and you look like you want to start hearing what the detective has to say." That is true. She sounded almost relieved. Even though she had talked herself into letting me stick around, I could tell that on the one hand, she didn't want to do the extra work, but on the other, she felt obligated to. She sounded pretty relieved that I gave her an out. Of course, she didn't thank me. I got a plate, a knife, and a teacup and saucer. I didn't put any sugar in my tea. Hell, until I moved into this place, I was all about the black coffee, so I didn't bother grabbing a spoon. When I got back, I poured myself some tea and grabbed a scone. I started spreading the clotted cream on it. I'd never even heard of the stuff before living here. Now I'd gotten addicted. Shirley sipped her tea and set up a tablet on a small stand with a tiny keyboard. Lestrade pulled out a paper notebook and started flipping through it. It didn't look like his official notepad that he used for casework. He would start mentioning a case, a burglary, a mugging, a fraud. Shirley didn't let him get in more than 2 sentences before she said, "That is not of interest." The minute she said that, Lestrade flipped a page and moved on. Shirley kept typing all along, even when she said that it wasn't of interest. Detective Bradstreet caught the double on 88th Street. Shirley interrupted him. I looked at that when it occurred, and based on newspaper and television accounts and social media postings by both victims, I surmised that it is a murder-suicide. The couple was going through a contentious divorce. There was no sign of forced entry or robbery, and Bradstreet thinks the same, Lestrade said. I winced. Shirley finally looked up from the tablet and glared right at Lestrade, who flinched. The couple was going through a contentious divorce. There was no sign of forced entry or robbery, and the husband owned the 6-hour pistol that was used. Moving on, the detective said, blowing out a nervous breath and flipping a page. You'd think he'd been around Shirley enough to know not to interrupt her. Detective Gregson thought he finally had a break in the Mayhew Gallery case. That one I recognized. That was a gallery over on Columbus that had a jewel or something stolen, right? Yes, the Borgatti Pearl. Gregson even called in the FBI's white-collar division, but the lead went nowhere, sadly. So he's back to square one. That is obviously of interest to you, Shirley said, since your colleague has been unable to end his investigation, but it is of no interest to me. Another page flipped. Looked like there was only 1 page of writing left. Detective Hopkins has a suspect in the robbery of the pizza place on Broadway and 101st. Sal and Carmine's? I asked. At Shirley's glare, I added, Hey, it's my favorite pizza joint. Lestrade smiled and nodded. It was one of the regular customers. Apparently he was upset that they put less pepperoni on the pizzas. That is not of interest, except perhaps to Jack. Shirley was still glaring at me. I ignored her and drank more tea. One last odd one, Lestrade said. Some peculiar cases of theft and vandalism. The first one was 4 days ago in a small shop on 100th, just off Central Park West. The Morse shop, Shirley said. Lestrade nodded. You know it? My aunt patronizes the store regularly. They specialize in jewelry, works of art, crafts, and other items created by hand by local artisans. I find most of their wares to be vulgar and ugly. Well, someone agrees with you, at least with regard to one of the items on display. Someone came into the store and stole a dragon figurine, shattering it on the sidewalk outside the store and running away. No surveillance? I asked. Shaking his head, Lestrade said, No, it's a tiny store that has never been burgled before, and they're a block from the 2-4. They didn't see much point in the expense of a camera. I snorted. It might now. Just the one figurine? Shirley asked. Yes, and it gets more peculiar. 3 days ago, a Dr. Hans Barnicot reported a similar crime. He had 2 dragon figurines of the same design. One was in his home, in the ground floor in a brownstone on 89th between Riverside and West End. The other in a storefront clinic he works on Broadway and 109th. In both cases, it was only the dragon figurine that was taken, and it was smashed. I stared at the detective while swallowing my scone. Telling me the clinic didn't have surveillance? Yes, Lestrade said, but also a thief who wore a wool hat and a large coat that covered his face and body type. And Dr. Barnicot's house had an alarm, which dutifully went off when the thief broke the front window, but all he took was the figurine off the sill and broke it at the corner of 89th and West End. In both cases, it was only the dragon figurine of that design that was taken. At the doctor's home, he had several different types of dragons on the sill, but only that one was removed and smashed, while the clinic had several figures of various kinds. Shirley's head tilted. These were all 3 of them by the same artist? So it would seem. I was not the investigating officer in either case. She finally stopped typing and sipped some more tea. Then she put her hands on the table. I wish to investigate this case further. I winced. Shirley sometimes helped people out with problems, but sticking your nose in police business was a separate matter. You sure that's a good idea? Lestrade, though, didn't seem too worried. It should be fine. Yes, they are open cases, but there is unlikely to be any further investigation. The officer who took Dr. Barnicot's statement indicated that the doctor only reported it for the insurance paperwork to get them to pay for his broken window, and also because the clinic requires it. The detective stood up. I'll email you the files on that secure email you gave me. Shirley nodded. Thank you. She looked down at the tablet and started typing again. Jack, would you be so kind as to escort the detective out? Sure. I got up and walked Lestrade to the door. Once we got into the foyer, Lestrade grinned, showing 2 rows of perfectly white teeth. I had the premonitions that she would be interested in the dragon figurines. I grabbed his denim jacket and handed it to him. And you figured it'd give her an itch to scratch? Lestrade shrugged into his jacket. If I bring her nothing of interest, I receive a rather lengthy harangue on the subject of our arrangement. This way she remains predisposed to not haranguing me. I continue to repay the debt I owe her, and as an added bonus, she is likely to solve the case. I smiled as I unlocked and opened the front door for him. Thought NYPD frowned on that. Oh, she will allow me to make the arrest and be the officer of record. In the worst instance, nothing happens. In 2 cases that were like to remain open permanently, stay open. In the best instance, I have 2 closed cases under my name. So win-win. Well, it's nice meeting you, Detective. I offered my hand and he shook it. It's the same here, Mr. Watson. After he left, I started to make my way back to the dining room to finish my tea and scone. As I entered, Shirley said, What do you make of this case, Jack? I shrugged. I don't know. It's a weird-ass OCD. Maybe the thief has a thing for dragons. Shirley shook her head. Dr. Barnicot had numerous figurines in the form of a dragon on his windowsill. Now, it would appear to be all dragon figurines by a particular artist. It might be worth investigating the artist in question. One hopes that he or she is identified in the report that the detectives will email me. One hopes he doesn't get caught, I said, gulping down my last of my tea. He's not supposed to share that stuff with civilians. Which is why he's using the secure email server. She'd mentioned that server before, and it had something to do with her brother, about whom I didn't know a damn thing, not even his name. Shirley didn't seem to like him all that much. Whatever. I was exhausted. I got up to leave, now desperately wanting my bed. The tea had helped a little, but ER shifts, especially unplanned ones on a Saturday night, took a lot out of me. But then Shirley said, What I find most fascinating is that 2 of the figurines were broken on the sidewalk in front of where they were stolen, yet the one taken from Dr. Barnicot's home office was broken on the next corner. Her fingers danced over the keyboard to the tablet. I knew that she was looking up a bunch of things. I was about to say goodnight when she stopped typing. Ah, yes. There is a work order with the Department of Transportation to fix a streetlight on West 89th Street between Riverside Drive and West End Avenue. It was filled yesterday, but at the time of the break-in, the light was out. Yeah, so? I shook my head. I guess he needed to see what he was smashing? Or maybe making sure it was the right statue? Perhaps. Well, you have fun with that. I'm going to bed. When I came downstairs the next morning, Shirley was in the same spot, the tea stuff all there, though the food was all gone. Ever since her aunt got cancer, they'd hired somebody to come in and clean the place every other day, but today was one of her days off. I figured I'd clean up after Shirley since nobody else was going to do it, and cockroaches would mess up the nice house. I grabbed the tea service, trying not to spill any crumbs, and commented on her having been here all night. I would think, Jack, that even someone of your intelligence would be able to determine that for yourself, given that I am wearing the same clothes, I have eaten all the food and drunk all the tea that was left, and my hair now has the oily consistency it frustratingly acquires when I have not showered in more than 37 hours. Was just making a comment. The pitch of your voice went higher on the word night, which is indicative of an interrogative rather than a declarative statement. I honestly didn't remember if I'd done that or not. In that case, it was rhetorical. What'd you find out? Quite a bit. The clinic does indeed have security footage, which was appended to the report that Detective Lestrade forwarded to me. The Morse shop has an Etsy site that shows all its wares, and Dr. Barnicot regularly updates his Facebook page with a near constant stream of pictures. I've been able to find images of all 3 figurines. She held up the tablet, which had what looked like a screen grab focused on a red dragon figurine. A picture of a windowsill filled with tchotchkes, one of which was a red dragon figurine, and a picture of a red dragon figurine against a white background. They all look the same to me. Shirley sighed, and I knew I'd said something wrong. The grooves and lines of the image from the Morse shop are sharper than those of the one on Dr. Barnicot's windowsill. The resolution of the security camera is insufficient to compare that level of detail for the one in the clinic. That they are similar enough to your eye that your eye cannot determine the difference indicates that these figurines were cast, but not with metal, plaster, or concrete. Likely, they were resin cast, as those molds tend to degrade over time, particularly ones created by single artisans rather than industrially produced. Which tracks with the stuff sold at the Morse shop. Indeed. She looked straight at me, which was rare. If you are free, would you like to accompany me to Columbus Avenue? Want to get some brunch? I am sated after consuming the remains of the tea service. No, I was referring to the Columbus Avenue Crafts Fair that occupies the section of that street behind the American Museum of Natural History. Based on the information in the Etsy shop, the creator of those dragon figurines, one Lise Gelder, has a stand there. Your presence would be useful in questioning her. I chuckled. If somebody wanted Shirley's help, she could interrogate better than the Army CID guys I served with in Afghanistan. But when it came to just talking to people, having a doctor in training along was a lot more useful. Well, I got today off, so sure. I got some lab notes I need to translate into English at some point, but I can do that later. I assume that to mean a figurative translation of poor handwriting and abbreviated text into something coherent rather than an actual translation. Some of the doctors who were training me didn't have English as their first language, as it happened, but I did not want to get into that with Ms. Literal, so I just said, yeah. We each showered, and I drank some coffee, and then we took an Uber to Columbus and 81st. Shirley has the Uber account because she got tired of being ignored by cabbies when she tried to hail one. As a large black man, I could relate. It was a nice spring day out, partly cloudy and warm, and the eastern sidewalk of Columbus that bordered the Theodore Roosevelt Park behind the Natural History Museum was packed with people, looking at the little stands that sold clothes, tchotchkes, jewelry, soaps, weird foods and food additives, art, and so on. Right at 79th Street was a stall filled with figurines of dragons, unicorns, and griffins, as well as a few real animals, tigers, lions, cats, dogs, ducks. What surprised me was that they were all different colors. I was figuring all the dragons would be red, based on the 3 that got stolen and smashed, but others here were green, blue, and purple. No red ones, interestingly enough, and only a few of each animal. The woman in the stall was a skinny blonde, wearing a wool sweater and black leggings. The sign over her head said, Lise Gelder Figurines. These are nice, I said, while Shirley stared at the individual figurines. Are these resin cast? She smiled. Yes. How did you know? I pointed at Shirley. My friend here figured it out from seeing your stuff up at the Morse shop on 100th. She's the brains of the outfit. Shirley let out an exasperated sigh, which helped me to stay in character. Gelder said, I prefer resin casting because they're transitory. It keeps me from mass producing. After 24 castings, the mold degrades too much. so I have to make a new one. It allows me to make multiples of the figurines, so there's a balance between uniqueness and my ability to put them in the hands of lots of people. Cool. I smiled at her, and she smiled back. Shirley then said, "You do not have any red dragons here." "Yes, all 6 of those are, well, unavailable. I usually make 6 in each color, and I sold 3 reds to the Morse shop where you saw them, and 2 more to my doctor." "That is only 5, Shirley said in an almost accusatory tone. Gilder flinched. "Well, she sighed. "It's embarrassing, really. The other one was broken by one of my interns." "Really?" "It's awful. I get interns from several local art schools, and they usually work for a semester, and they get credits. I really had hopes for Barry. He had a rough childhood, you know? But he had talent, and he managed to get a scholarship to Pratt, and I took him on last spring. And then he wound up being arrested halfway through the semester because of a fight he got into. When he got out on parole last month, he just showed up at the workshop and started messing around with my computer. He said he was picking up his internship where it left off. He wasn't even enrolled anywhere anymore." She sighed. "I felt bad for him, but he lost his scholarship, so I couldn't give him credits, and I can't afford to pay. That's why I do the internships in the first place. He got upset and broke the last red dragon I had in the workshop." Then she smiled. "I'm sorry, I'm babbling. Did you have any other questions about the figurines?" "How much are the griffins? My buddy Shorty collects these things." We talked price, and then she talked about griffins for 5 minutes, and I finally wound up buying a green griffin for Shorty. By that time, Shirley was messing with her smartphone. Once we walked away from the stall, Shirley asked, "Is this Shorty person a colleague at Columbia or a fellow enlistee in the armed forces? Or did you simply make him up in order to contrive an excuse to buy a figurine in exchange for the vast stores of information Ms. Gelder provided?" I grinned. "What, you can't tell?" She looked up from her phone. "I am not clairvoyant, Jack. You have never made a single mention of Shorty in the time of our acquaintance, so I have no data from which to make a determination." "Yeah, fair enough. He's an army buddy. He used to wear a Griffin pin on his fatigues all the time. He had Griffin stickers on his footlocker and tons of Griffin stuff all over everything he owned. Honestly, he gets so many of the damn things, it's hard to find something he doesn't have. So I figured I'd grab this." "I have sent a text to a former client who works at the Pratt Institute, for whom I once located a pet kitten." "Really?" Shirley nodded. It was quite a challenge, as predicting the movements of felines is rather difficult. However, I did locate her, and in return, she should be able to provide me with the information on anyone named Barry who received a scholarship in the past 3 years. She summoned another Uber to take us home, and she went straight up to her room on the 3rd floor. I followed while she fired up one of her computers, a purple iMac that was more than a decade and a half old, called up a file, typed a few things, then printed the document on a color laser printer which had the sheen of sheets of business cards in it. When the sheet printed, she tugged at the perforations and then handed a business card to me. I read off the words on the card, which was very professionally designed. "IYS Insurance, Jack Watson Investigator." I looked at her. "I'm kind of afraid to ask why you handed me this." "We are about to summon another Uber that will take us to the Morse shop once you change into more presentable clothes." It was a lot easier than I thought it would be to convince the proprietor of the Morse shop that I was an insurance investigator. The suit I was wearing made a big difference, and besides, who'd pretend to be an insurance investigator anyhow? The guy was named Samuel Morse, and when he introduced himself right away, he said, "Yes, I've heard all the jokes about codes. Thanks." I explained that theirs wasn't the only Gelder Red Dragon that was stolen and broken, and that we wanted to contact the people who bought the other 2 that Gelder had provided. Since Morse got them on consignment, he was happy to cooperate. An insurance report might help him not have to pay Gelder for the figurine. I thought cooperating to help cheat an artist out of income was sleazy, but whatever. He wasn't willing to give out addresses or phone numbers, but he did provide names and email addresses, which was good enough. One of them was a married couple who ran a karate dojo on Columbus and 106th. So we figured we'd just walk there and see what they could tell us. On the way, Shirley sent an email to the other customer, Matilda Sandiford. As we walked up Columbus to the dojo, though, we saw sirens and crime scene tape and such. There was a crowd around the dojo, so we couldn't get any closer than a few dozen feet past the corner of 105th, but we did see Lestrade, about 2 seconds after he saw us. He climbed under the yellow tape and made a beeline right for us. "Jesus shit, what are you doing here?" he asked in a harsh whisper. Shirley just stared at him. "That is a stupid question. We are investigating the thefts of the Gelder Red Dragons. One of them was sold to the proprietors of this dojo." "Gelder?" Rolling her eyes, Shirley said, "The woman who crafted the figurines. We determined that the couple who..." Lestrade held up his hands. "Never mind. It doesn't matter, because this is a murder investigation." My eyes went wide. "Who got killed?" "A local banger went by the street name of Step. He was not a student of the dojo, nor do the owners have any notion as to why he was here. And that is as much as I may tell you." "We should probably..." I started, but Shirley wasn't done. "What about the Red Dragon figurine? Was it broken?" Several items were broken, including the Red Dragon, along with the pot containing a large plant, 2 chairs, and several trophies. But look, this is no longer about vandalism. This is homicide. And I'm going to have to request that you refrain from further investigation into these thefts. Shirley's phone made a buzzing noise. She held it up, peered at it, then stared straight at Lestrade. I caught a glance at the screen, and it was from the same number as the woman from Pratt she'd contacted a little while ago. "If you wish to close this case, Detective, I suggest that you see if Step here has any association with a young man whose name is Barry Harding." With that, Shirley turned and walked back toward 105th Street. I gave Lestrade an apologetic shrug. "Jesus shit," he muttered, and went back to the scene. I assumed that was the end of it, but on Wednesday night, when I got back from the hospital, Shirley invited me out to the bagel place she and I both liked on 98th and Broadway. I agreed to go along. She brought along a small hand towel and a hammer for some reason. I considered asking her about it, but then decided that if she did pack it, she intended to use it and figured it'd be more fun to find out why at the right time. We stopped at an ATM along the way, and she took out $100. I figured it would be just the two of us, but both Lestrade and another guy who pretty much had "cop" tattooed on his forehead were sitting at one of the bagel place's small round tables, cups of coffee in front of each of them. The other detective was a white guy wearing a butt-ugly suit. He had short hair and one of those mustaches you only saw on cops and 1970s porn stars. Lestrade did the honors. "Shirley, Jack, this is Detective Toby Gregson." "How do you do, Detective?" Shirley said as she sat down on one of the 2 remaining chairs. "I'm doing great. Besides hearing about G's little friend who solved the ear thing for him." "She didn't solve it for me. She assisted," Lestrade said defensively. "And she also led us to finding Barry Harding and arrest him for the murder of Fred Step Parkner." "So he did do it?" I asked. Lestrade smiled. "So it would seem. Ultimately, it is the ADA's problem to prove that. Regardless, Shirley saved me considerable time and effort to find him." Gregson chuckled. "She did, huh? I don't know, she don't look like much." Shirley closed her eyes, sighed, and then said, "I would say you should not be fooled by appearances, but in truth, appearances can tell you everything if you know where to look. You, for example, are very recently divorced, and you also recently quit smoking, doubtless not for the first time. You live with an Irish setter who is getting rather aged, and you were born left-handed, but trained yourself to write with your right hand." Gregson looked over at Lestrade. "Fuck you tell this bitch about me?" "Nothing," Lestrade said. "This is merely what she does." "Okay, I get how you figured out Molly. That's the dog, by the way, not the ex. That bitch sheds like a motherfucker. It's probably all over me. But what about the rest of it?" "Your left ring finger is discolored where your right ring used to be, and you fiddle with it as you're not used to it being there. You're holding the coffee stirrer as if it were a cigarette, and your teeth are yellowed, but your breath contains none of the stench of cigarette smoke, nor that of any breath mints or mouthwash that might be used to cover it, so you have not smoked recently, but you used to, and have not adjusted to quitting. You wear a watch on your right hand, and you drink your coffee with your left, indicating that you're left-handed, yet the calluses on your pinky finger and on the side of your right hand, as well as the ink stains in that spot, indicates that you write with your right." Nodding, Gregson said, "Not bad. I also assume that the divorce is recent because you have oversaturated yourself with cologne, and your mustache is ill-trimmed, indicating that you are grooming yourself more often than you used to." "All right, enough, I get it. I don't blame you for using her, G, if she can pick that shit up. Fuck the boss, as long as the case is closed, who gives a fuck how it's done?" Shirley stared at him. I would think it would matter a great deal if you wish to get a conviction. Yeah, but if it actually gets anywhere near a fucking courtroom, most of the time they plea out anyhow. So if they're going to skip past steps in the system, why shouldn't we? I was seriously worried that they were going to go down a rabbit hole on the philosophy of policing, but we were saved by an African-American woman who approached the table. Excuse me, you Shirley Holmes? Yes, you must be Matilda Sandiford. Yeah, I brought the thing. She dug around in her purse and pulled out something wrapped in tissue paper. When she unwrapped it, we all saw the 6th red dragon. Lestrade shook his head and chuckled. That is what this is about? Surely we have closed a murder. Of what relevance are a few petty thefts? Petty thefts? Sandiford said. Ignore him, please. Shirley pulled out her wallet. I believe the agreed-upon sum was $100? Yeah. Sandiford hesitated. Look, lady, I gotta tell you, I only paid $25 for this thing. I mean, I like it and all, but I feel bad taking so much. Nonetheless, that is the sum we agreed upon. Hey, I'll take the $75. I just want you to know what you're getting yourself into. It ain't that nice a dragon. Perhaps, but the sum is worth it to me. Shirley handed over the cash she'd gotten out of the ATM, and Sandiford handed over the red dragon. A server came outside and took our order. Sandiford said goodbye and left, and Shirley ordered some Assam tea while I ordered a coffee and a blueberry muffin. Once the server left, Gregson said, "The fuck is all this about?" Shirley set the figurine down on the table. Barry Harding was a student at the Pratt Institute on a scholarship. He worked for much of the spring semester last year as an intern to Lise Gelder, the sculptor who creates these figurines. She does them in resin, the molds for which deteriorate after 24 casts, so she only makes 24 of each type, though every 6 casts she changes the color of the resin she uses. Mr. Harding was arrested for assault and battery last March, pled guilty, and achieved parole after 1 year. We are all aware of this. I wasn't, Gregson said. Don't know why anybody gives a fuck, though. There's a reason for you to care, Detective Gregson, which I will explain shortly. It is my theory that before he was arrested, Barry needed to hide an object where no one could find it, and so he placed it inside the red dragon that was being cast at the time. When he was released on parole, he went to Ms. Gelder's workshop and operated her computer, likely obtaining sales records. He then sought out the red dragons, attempting to find the object he'd hidden. With no method of determining which of these 6 red ones he hid the object in, he stole each one and broke it, hoping to find the object inside. That was why he went down the street from Dr. Barnicoat's brownstone. The nearest streetlight on 89th Street was not functioning, and he needed light to perform his task. Still not seeing the point of this, Gregson said. Here is where we come to you, Detective, because while he offered no testimony, the victim in Detective Lestrade's case, Stepp, was a witness to Mr. Harding's assault, which took place around the corner from the Mayhew Gallery. The victim of Mr. Harding's assault, to which he pled guilty, was a security guard who worked for the company that provided security to the Mayhew Gallery, at least up until the theft of the Borgatti Pearl, at which point the gallery dispensed with their services. Gregson snorted. Don't blame him. Still not sure why I'm here, unless this has to do with the theft of the pearl. Shirley pulled the towel and hammer out of her bag. She picked up the red dragon and wrapped the towel around it, then put it back down on the table. Now that Miss Sandiford is well away, after pulling the hammer out of the bag, she started smashing the figurine. The 2 detectives flinched. I smiled inwardly. I knew there was going to be something entertaining with that hammer. She unwrapped the towel to reveal a whole bunch of resin shards, and, in the middle of them, a little black jewel. Sweet goddamn holy motherfuck, Gregson said. Jesus shit, Lestrade muttered. Shirley reached down and used a paper napkin to pick up the jewel. Detective Gregson, I believe that this is the Borgatti Pearl. Reaching into his suit jacket pocket, Gregson pulled out an evidence bag. I do not fucking believe this. Over a year on this with a task force and the fucking FBI, and is closed by some skinny chick. Hey, I said with a grin. Shirley just ain't just any skinny chick. She found the only one of the 6 dragons that hadn't been smashed yet and bought it off the owner so y'all could get your stone back. As he gingerly put the pearl in the evidence bag, Gregson said, I don't care if she's Ivanka fucking Trump. I'm going to need statements from both of you. But first, gee, I need to talk to your suspect. We both do. Lestrade gulped down the rest of his coffee. Forgive us, Shirley, Jack, but we must follow up on this new evidence immediately. I helped the detective gather up the shards of the red dragon statue in the towel and put it all in the evidence bag with the pearl. Chain of custody was a mess, since Shirley went and shattered it, but Lestrade seemed to think that just having the pearl in hand would lead to a confession. Didn't matter to me either way. All I really noticed was the last thing Gregson said before he and Lestrade headed back to the 2-4. "I owe you one, kid." The server finally came back with my coffee and muffin and Shirley's tea. After she put the food and drinks down, she said, "Are the two gentlemen coming back?" "They didn't pay, did they?" I asked. "No." The server sounded upset. Shirley waved a hand back and forth. "I will pay for all 4 orders." I took a sip of my coffee and chuckled. "Guess they owe you more than one now." "I believe the price of 2 cups of coffee is more than sufficient for the satisfaction of a job well done, Jack." "Well, that and $100 for a statue you don't even get to keep." "That is hardly an issue, as I find the figurines to be hideous. Nonetheless, the problem is solved." I held up my coffee. "Solving 2 cases at once." Shirley nodded and held up her own tea. After she took a sip, she actually smiled. It was kind of funny looking. Her face didn't look right, and I was hoping she'd stop soon. But then, being forced to look at her smile was a small price to pay for getting her to smile in the first place. The end. You can find this in Baker Street Irregulars, The Game is Afoot, which is this follow-up to Baker Street Irregulars. Both of them are published by Diversion Books, and you can get them from all the usual online book dealers. There's all sorts of other neat stories in the 2 books by a lot of really nifty writers. Jody Lynn Nye, David Gerald, Hildy Silverman, Gordon Linzer, a bunch of other people. Really, really, really good collection. Both of them are really good collections. Gail Z. Martin, Daniel Kimmel, a bunch of others. So do check it out. And thank you again for watching. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Please check me out online at DeCandido.net or DeCandido.wordpress.com. Please support my Patreon at patreon.com/KRAD. And please stay safe. Thank you.